Hello, my name is Herb Silver, and I'm introducing the Breathing is the Key lecture series. I want to just quickly go over just an outline of what we're going to be presenting. Our first talk will be on the pulmonary system, and with very much geared towards a functional understanding of some of the parameters we want to be looking at. For instance, how oxygen and CO2 are exchanged from the atmosphere and into our lungs, and how we can use our lungs to control the relative acidity or alkalinity of our blood and the level of CO2 in our blood, and enhance the exchange of oxygen between our red blood cells, moving off of our blood into our muscles and brain. You would think that this was an easy process. It seems like we all know how to breathe. That's one of the critiques of the present situation, is that we actually don't breathe so well, and it creates many problems. And we're going to go through a list of problems that are created with people's aberrant breathing processes. We'll go through the basic terminology. There's extensive, a little bit in the weeds there, but we need to have terms to define what we're talking about, like tidal volume and residual volume, and what we're doing with our lungs, and understanding that, and how we're going to modulate those. In order to understand how we're going to modulate those things, we need to review the terminology. Not a big deal, but we'll go through that. Then there's the more, to me, fascinating things, is a discussion about some of the effects that we're going to create in the body by enhancing function in our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, and how we can measure that. Some of the parameters, for instance, heart rate variability gives you a pretty direct reading of your autonomic versus your parasympathetic system. And we will go through that. We also talk about we'll also be talking about the vagus nerve. Lots of fascinating information about the vagus nerve and how it impacts with some of the inflammatory cytokines, particularly tumor necrosis factor, and how that influences our immune response in our spleen. Tying together various researches from various areas, and maybe a simpler approach using breathing. We'll go over the mechanics of breathing, and now we all should be familiar with diaphragmatic breathing, but looking at how using the diaphragm and how altering our posture influences not only the mix of gases in our lungs, but also there's some awesome MRI real-time video of cerebral spinal fluid, and how diaphragmatic breathing impacts as pumping cerebral spinal fluid through our central nervous system. Just totally incredible things. And we'll go through some of the mechanics of breathing, and how the relative elasticity of our lungs and being able to dilate the nasal tissue and our alveoli with various blood gases, for instance, nitric oxide that's released in our sinuses when it goes into our lungs, how it affects the lung function and the exchange of gases. So we'll go over that, and we're not going to be shy about pointing to the research that supports all this, and it's not new research necessarily. The ideal ranges for acidity and carbon dioxide in our blood have been known since the early 1900s, and we just haven't had a functional way of measuring that. And a lot of what we've learned over the years about the right way to breathe is maybe not so correct. So we're going to do that, and we'll plenty of conversation about the science, plenty of conversation about the various blood gases, acidity of the blood, alkalinity of the blood, Mechanically, how we're using our ribs and how we incorporate manual therapy into a breathing protocol and what all these impairments, how they all add up to be pathological. So I wanted just to give you a brief overview and then not to leave out how all this impacts us clinically. You know, what are we going to do with this information? How can we use it? How can we make measurements, clinical measurements of rib cage motion, diaphragmatic breathing, posture, has a big impact on the exchange of gases in our lungs. So how do we measure that clinically? Plus, use of capnographs, which measure exhaled CO2, which gives us a direct measure. We're using that to help develop protocols, and we'll be using it to help explain what the different breathing modalities do. And you'll be able to see in real time how it affects the acidity of our blood and oxygen exchange. You know, not only a capnograph, but pulse oximetry, and using blood pressure, heart rate, respiration rate, all these clinical measures we can start bringing into our clinical context and how we're going to affect various disease processes that we all run into on a daily basis, as well as even impacting performance on a sports medicine basis. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you.